Corner. I'm Arabella, and today we will be reading Tricking the Tallyman. When Phineas Bump rode into the town of Tunbridge, he was heartsick, sad and sore, and down on his luck. Heartsick because he hadn't seen his beloved wife, Jenny, in 3 months. Sad and sore because he'd been riding through the rooty Vermont woods. Down on his luck because his saddlebag was completely empty. "How can I count the people without paper, ink, and quills?" he asked his horse, Blue. Blue, being a horse, didn't answer. She just stopped at the first house on the edge of town. Phineas dismounted, mumbling, I know. Count them I must, and count them I will." He approached the front door. Knock, knock. A woman opened the door, but just a crack. "Madame," he proclaimed, "I am Phineas Bump, Assistant Marshal of the United States of America. By order of our Congress and Constitution, I am here to tally the people of the District of Vermont." "Begone, Tallyman," said the woman, "for we are a town that won't be counted." Bang went the door in Phineas' face. "Oh, ho," he said softly. "'Tis another one looking for a fight." Phineas liked the challenge. He stiffened his spine and raised his hand to the door. Knock, knock, knock. The woman opened the door again, but only half a crack. "Count you I must, and count you I will," said Phineas. "But for tonight I seek only a roof over my head. Might there be an inn nearby?" "We have neither an inn nor tavern, for we are a town that does not welcome strangers." Bang! Phineas' smile widened. "Oh ho, hey-ya, a challenge indeed." "Perhaps I could sleep in the corner of your shed," he shouted. But this time the door didn't open at all, not 1 inch. Phineas just laughed as he grabbed Blue's bridle and walked to a nearby stand of white pines. "Should we give up and go home, old Blue?" he asked as he unsaddled his horse. Blue tossed her head. "That's what I think, too," said Phineas, and he unrolled his blanket and laid down to sleep on the cold, hard ground. Meanwhile, on the other side of the door, Miss Pepper called out, "Children, come quick! The terrible Tallyman has come to Tunbridge." "What's a Tallyman?" asked Mercy. "Oh, he's an awful scoundrel sent by the government," said Miss Pepper. "He counts every person in a town, and the more people he counts, the more money our town will have to pay." "That's called taxes," said Boston. Miss Pepper nodded. "Aye, and if there is another war, the government will know how many men we have and will steal them away to be soldiers." "That's called conscription," said Boston. "Aye, it is, my boy. Devils and deuces, whatever shall we do?" Patience burst into tears. Thomas hid in the wood box, but Boston said, "Don't worry, Ma, I've got a plan." "Oh ho, hey-ya! We will be the town that tricks the Tallyman." In the morning, Phineas rose and brushed the pine needles out of his hair. "Count them I must, and, well, you know," he said to Blue before walking to the Pepper house. Knock, knock! Miss Pepper opened the door grandly and offered Phineas the best seat by the fire. He pulled out an empty ink pot, a broken quill, and a letter. "'Tis from my wife," he explained. "But as I haven't any other paper, I will use this to make my record." Miss Pepper stared sharply at the date on the letter. 2 months old. Has it been that long since you've seen her? A long and longer, said Phineas. Phineas scooped some ashes from the fire into the ink pot, mixed them with the spittle, and dipped the broken quill into the bottle. Then, in the margin of the letter, Phineas carefully wrote, Tunbridge, October 18th, 1790. He turned to Miss Pepper. Madame, what is your name? Sarah Pepper. Your husband is, alas, gone, she said, clasping her hands and looking heavenward. My condolences, Widow Pepper. And how many children have you? Not a one. Phineas looked up. I found 3 mattresses, a jackbed with a trundle, and a cradle. Oh, but they are not for children, Miss Pepper explained. Phineas sighed. I will mark but one, he said. 1 free white female, thus counted. So it turns out all the mattresses are for the chickens, and then there's a pig right there, and a cow, and then a fox. Or is that a cat? Yes, that's a cat. As Phineas marched outside and approached the door of the next house, Miss Pepper scurried close behind. That house is empty, Mr. Bunn, she called out. Phineas knocked on door after door, but every house was empty. Not a single person in the town of Tunbridge could be found. Widow Pepper, are you telling me that in all of Tunbridge there is not one but free white female? He asked. 'Twould appear so, said Miss Pepper with a twinkle in her eye. Then I shall post the results, so that anyone who disputes the facts may come forth. And if none disputes them by tomorrow, they shall be declared fair and true, and so they shall stand. Phineas nailed the results of his tally to the chestnut tree that stood in the town square. Blue, he said, Today I have been played for a fool, but tomorrow we shall see who has the last laugh. At that very moment, Boston Pepper came running in. Ma, Ma, he shouted. I've been to the next town over, and it's not for taxes or soldiers he's counting the people. It's to figure out how many men we send to the new government. What do you mean? Said Miss Pepper. The more he counts, the more men we'll send to the new government in Philadelphia. The more men we send, the more votes we get, and that's how we'll get the things we need, like good roads and regular mail delivery. Carping cod, exclaimed Miss Pepper. We must trick the Tallyman into counting us again. But how? Don't worry, Ma, said Boston. I've got a plan. That night, Phineas again lay down to sleep among the tall white pines, still thinking of his Jenny and missing her more than ever. The next morning he rose. Citizen of Tunbridge, he called out, are the results as posted fair and true? Not entirely, said Miss Pepper. I think, sir, that you must count again. Phineas shook his head. Madame, he said, that I cannot do. I am entirely out of paper. Miss Pepper frowned. Paper was rare indeed. The Tallyman turned to leave. Wait, I will gather your paper, Miss Pepper declared. By tomorrow, you will have a ledgerful. Then she added in a whisper, a thin ledgerful. Phineas shook his head again. But, Madame, he said, I have neither quills nor ink. Miss Pepper pursed her lips. "We will boil you 6 pots of ink and gather a dozen quills." "But, Madame," said Phineas, "I cannot possibly sleep another night at the White Pine Inn." He turned again to leave. Miss Pepper squinted. "Constance devotion runs in ordinary. You may stay there, free of charge." "Oh, but, Madame," said Phineas with a twinkle in his eye, "I'm afraid I'm not fit to be seen in such a fine place. My cloak, you see." Miss Pepper held out her hand. "Give it to me, Tallyman. I will mend it myself." Phineas breakfasted that day on frumentary and mutton chops, dined on beefsteaks and baked beans, and supped on bread and butter and beer. He slept in a feather bed, and in the morning his cloak was better than new. On the steps of the ordinary, Phineas found a wood-backed, leather-bound ledger with 20 sheets of paper sewn into it, 6 pots of the blackest ink, and a dozen turkey quills. And then that turkey's missing some feathers. Well rested, well fed, and well supplied, Phineas knocked on Miss Pepper's door. "Madame," he said, "I have come to count your family." Of course, Mr. Bump. Do come in. Please meet my, recently returned husband, Mr. Samuel Pepper." "And with him," said Miss Pepper with a wave of her arm, "my 15 children." 17 souls under one roof," said Phineas. At the Swindle house, Phineas counted a husband, a wife, a brother, his wife, a father, and 22 children. At the Grape house, he counted a husband, a wife, 2 cousins, and 13 children. At the Thickpenny house, he counted a husband, a wife, 2 sisters, their husbands, 4 sets of grandparents, and 37 children. By sunset, Phineas had counted 1,726 people. He nailed the results to the chestnut tree. "Citizens and animals of Tunbridge," he announced, "I have posted the results of my tally. If none disputes them by tomorrow, they shall be declared fair and true, and so shall they stand." Then he walked away through the evening gloom to his room at the ordinary, grumbling, "'Tis a tally not worth the paper it is written on." Just then, Boston came bursting through the door of the Pepper house. "Ma," he called, "I've been talking to a stranger who's passing through, and he says the counting is for taxes and soldiers. Heaven help us! And for sending men to represent us in the new government." "Both?" asked Miss Pepper. "Both," answered Boston. "Cheese and chowder," said Miss Pepper. She pressed her hands to her temples. "If the Tallyman's count is high, we will owe too much in taxes and soldiers. If the Tallyman's count is low, we will have a weak voice in the new government." "Who thought of this method?" "The men who wrote the Constitution," said Boston. Clever devils they be," shouted Miss Pepper. "Oh, Boston, what is your plan now?" Boston paced the floor and tapped his forehead. He pulled his hair. He rubbed his nose. He picked up the fire poker and waved it about. "Mother," he finally said, "I'm working on it." The next morning, Phineas slept late. The cows were milked and grazing on the common by the time he had packed up and saddled Old Blue. As Phineas and Blue approached the chestnut tree, he called out, "Citizens of Tunbridge, are the results as posted fair and true?" "Not entirely," said Miss Pepper. "I think, sir, that you must count again." "Madame Pepper," shouted Phineas, "I have been away from my dearest wife for 3 months. I will not stay in Tunbridge even one more day." Boston pushed his way through the crowd. "Sir, if you will but count us one more time, I think I shall deliver to you a letter from your wife." "Impossible," declared Phineas. "I promise it," declared Boston. Phineas stared at Boston. "Then I will count one more time." And so Phineas walked from house to house. By evening, he had counted 487 people. He nailed the results to the old chestnut tree and called out, "Citizens of Tunbridge, I ask you now, are the results as posted fair and true?" Boston Pepper stepped forward. "Fair and true they are, good sir." Then he pulled a letter from behind his back and handed it to Phineas. "The postal rider came through early this morning. He's been asking for a Mr. Phineas Bump through half the towns in Vermont." Phineas broke the seal on the letter and read Jenny's words. Only Boston was near enough to see the tears of joy that sparkled in the Tallyman's eyes. Phineas folded the letter and coughed once. "My dear Jenny is well," he said stiffly, "and she sends news. We are to have a child in the spring." Boston turned to the shuttered houses and yelled, "His dear Jenny is well, and they will have a child come spring." A loud huzzah rose up from the town, and the people spilled out into the square. "You know, Mr. Bump," said Boston, "I would have given you the letter, even if you'd refused to count. And I, young man, would have counted you even without this letter." Then he raised his hand solemnly and said, "For count you I must, and count you I did. And now my job is well and verily done, entirely." And so Phineas Bump rode out of the town of Tunbridge, no longer heartsick, saddle-sore, or down on his luck. Many more weeks of counting lay ahead of him, but now he traveled with a far lighter heart. Miss Pepper and Boston watched as Phineas rode into the Vermont woods. "Ah, Boston," said Miss Pepper, "I guess we are not the town that tricked the Tallyman after all." "Sure we are, Ma," said Boston. "We're the town that tricked the Tallyman twice. But then," he winked at his mother, "we decided 'twas better to be fair and true. And so we were, entirely." I hope you enjoyed the book.